Welcome to this tutorial video for students doing CS120. This video is going to cover the 5th week, which is the final week of Arduino practicals. This is the last worksheet on the triathlon scenario. This worksheet is says designed to use preprocessor directives and do a bit more looping. The scenario is the same. The only difference is that our software should take in times for multiple athletes. It should then record the athlete with the fastest time and says that the athlete will be identified by a number, the athlete's index in the entered data, with the first athlete being number 1. The output is supposed to be the same as it was before. The format is unchanged, so we need the swim, bike, run and total times printed out. They should be printed out after each athlete has their details have been entered into the program. And what else? Yes, it says that your program should stop if the user enters a negative value for swim hours. There's a hint that says you could consider using a while loop and possibly a break statement. When the program stops, it should display the following output, which is a sort of line of equals, and then the fastest athlete was number X, where X is the ID of the fastest athlete, with a total time of X hours, X minutes, X seconds, full stop, and some more equal signs underneath. It also says that we do not need to store the individual event times for the fastest triathlete, nor store individual athlete times once they have been displayed. Okay. Task 1, adding preprocessor directives. Okay, yeah. So it says to consider how you can use hash define and hash if def directives to let you switch this code on and off. So we're going to have a quick play now. The hash defines are something called preprocessor directives. They are things that will be picked up when your code is pre-processed. This means that this program, before it is compiled, it will be run through a program called the preprocessor. And the preprocessor will run through your code looking for things like hash defines and sort of sorting all of that out before your code is compiled. This means that we can use preprocessor functions to sort of simplify our code or to sort of add and remove sections of our code fairly easily. We've been told to use hash defines and hash if defs to do a sort of debug release type structure. I'm going to define debug, and we don't need to define it as anything. If we just do hash define debug, then the preprocessor will know that debug has been defined. That is enough to do just that. We can then use if def and if to sort of comment out effectively bits of code. So I'll give an example. It might be useful for our, what's a good example? Preempt triathlon times. Good debug information might be to print out the total number of seconds before we do all of our calculations on that number. That means that we could check whether the maths had been done correctly. So if we type hash if def debug, whoops. If I put serial.println totals I, just make sure that compiles. It does, yes. Now, because I have defined debug up here, that one line of code, so in between the if def debug and the end if, that will be included in my program. If I were to comment this out and recompile, I've now made a program that does not contain that line of code. It wasn't compiled at all. It's not that it's like an if statement in the code. This line was not even in the file that was compiled. That is the sort of the beauty of these sorts of things. So it means that I can have a program with a whole bunch of debug information and I can just switch it all on and off when I want. Something else that I might do that would be useful to do would be to print out debug sort of before anything that I print out, which is debug information. So I could do serial.print debug. So I could do this. That would work. Something else that I could do, which since we're using preprocessor directives, we might as well, is that I could do hash define, for example, something called, let's just say print debug, to be equal to serial.print debug. That means that when I want to print this out, I can just use print debug, and the preprocessor will substitute the words print debug with this little line of code. Where is it? Yep. So if I put that here, I can just do print debug. If I upload this, we can make sure that this works. We should get, when we're printing out the times, debug colon and then the total number of seconds. So I'm going to enter in a bunch of times this, and you can see that it says debug and then a total number here. That's good because we could just make sure we could get a calculator out and say, what is 7,322 in hours, minutes, and seconds, and just double check that our maths is correct. I'll just do that. I'm sure there are other places that I could put these things in, but I'm going to move on to the other part of the worksheet. Task 2 is adding the looping for multiple athletes. It asks us what variables and functions do we need to implement the newly extended behavior in this scenario. So let's start with that. So we've been asked to store also the fastest time and the ID of the athlete that had that time. We have an array already, so we may as well make use of that. We'll make it one bigger. That means we can now store the swim, bike, run total times and the current fastest total time. We can also store the current fastest athlete's ID. So we're going to make it an array of size 6. We could store the ID as a separate thing, but we have this data structure that contains all the rest of our data, so we might as well store everything there. I don't think that's a particularly terrible idea. That seems to be the first sort of change that we're going to need. We're also going to need a new integer called current athlete ID, which we're going to set to be 0. This is just because we need to keep track of the number of our athletes, so we need to be able to store which athlete is currently having their details entered, which means that we can then check their time against the current fastest time and store that number if they are the new fastest competitor. Hints are you'll need an index to keep track of the current athlete's number, so that's what I've done here in athlete ID. You will need to store the current fastest time and the current fastest athlete, so I've done that by making the totals array a bit bigger, so big enough to store 2 new values. It says that you are looping an unknown number of times, and if the swim hours is negative, you should exit the loop immediately. This might use a continue or a break command. Remember to use preprocessor directives, etc. Okay, so let's get started. I think the first thing that we probably need to change is getting multiple athletes, so entering in the details for multiple athletes. So I'm going to change my setup function a little bit, and I'm going to, what am I going to change first? Okay, I think I'm going to change the get triathlon input function. Yeah. So we were told that we need an infinite loop, probably, or that was a hint. We can do this by creating a while loop where we put something that just will always evaluate to true. So we could just put true, we could just put 1. This is a loop that will just carry on running forever. And inside that loop, we're going to get the input and print out triathlon times. If I upload this, then we can quickly test that I can enter in more than one athlete and that the times work. So I'm going to enter an athlete with time of 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. Okay, so I've gotten a total time of 3 hours, 3 minutes and seconds, and I'm going to add another athlete with a time of 2 hours, 2 minutes, 2 seconds, just to make sure. So yeah, this total time is also still correct, and I could enter in more if I wanted to, but it is working. Good. I now, I think, need to check whether the user has entered in -1. So I need a way of stopping, otherwise my program will keep on asking me for more details forever and ever and ever. So I'm going to change my get triathlon input. Instead of returning a void, I think I'm going to return a boolean. And that boolean is going to be true if we should stop, and false if we should carry on. How is it going to do that? Well, I'm going to check if temp hour is less than 0. So if the user has entered in a negative number and I is equal to 0, I'm going to say return true. And at the end of this, I'm going to return false. So I'm just going to explain that again. I'm going to read in, or I'm going to prompt the user to enter in the event hours. Once they've done that, I'm going to say, just going to check, is what they've typed in, what they've entered in, is that less than 0, and is I equal to 0. Why am I checking that? Well, the first event is the swim, and that is when we're supposed to exit. So we're supposed to exit when the user enters in a negative number for the swim hours, not for any other event hours, but for the swim hours. The first event is the swim, so I will be 0 when we are reading in the swim times. That is why I'm checking that I is equal to 0, as well as checking whether the user has entered in a negative number. If they have entered in a negative number, I'm going to return true. That means this function will exit here at this line. The rest of this function will not run. So I will immediately leave this function and I'm going to return true because the user has entered a minus number. So they have decided to stop entering in athletes. If they do not enter in a negative number, then this loop will carry on running. It will get down to the bottom, it will get the total number of time, etc., and then it will return false because the user has not requested to stop. So that means I need to change this function a little bit. I should probably have a boolean called should stop. I'm going to set it to false to start off with, and I'm going to say should stop is equal to the result of get try athlon input. So if the user has requested that we stop now, should stop will be set to true, otherwise it will be set to false. If should stop is true, then we want to print out the fastest time, otherwise we want to print out just the athlete's time. A shorthand of writing if should stop equals true, we can just write if should stop, because should stop is a boolean, so it is either true or false. We don't need to compare it to true or false to figure out if it is true or false. Fairly obvious, but handy. Right. For the moment, I'm just going to write serial.println yay, we've stopped. And I'm also going to do something. I'm going to effectively stop the program at this point. What would be the best way of doing that? I'll put in a break statement. Yeah. So what should happen is that whilst we're entering in details, should stop is going to be false. So we're going to print out that athlete's times. Eventually, when we enter in a minus number for the swim hours, should stop is going to be true. We're going to print yay we've stopped, and we call break. So break should break out of the containing loop, which in this case is this infinite while loop. So what should happen is that we print yay we stopped, we break, so we exit this loop, and we're actually then going to just sit in this void loop function forever and ever. I'll just upload that and make sure it works. So I'll enter in 2 athletes and then a negative number and see if it works. That's the first athlete. That's the second athlete. And a minus number in for the swim hours. Yay, we've stopped. Good. The sort of framework of our program is starting to come together. The bit that we have left is checking whether the time of the athlete that's just been entered in is faster than our current fastest time. I'm going to do this. Where am I going to do this? I'm going to create a new function actually. I think that's a good idea. It's not going to return anything, it's going to be called update fastest. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say if, well, let's just quickly go back up the top here. I'm going to store the fastest time in the 5th element of my totals array and the ID of the fastest athlete in the 6th element. So I can check if totals 4, which is going to be the current fastest time. So if totals 4 is less, no, yes, totals 4 is the, is the current fastest time. Getting myself confused here. I want to check if totals 3 is less than totals 4. So totals 3, the 4th element of that array, is the total time of the current athlete that's had their times entered into the program. Totals 4, which is the fifth element of the array, contains the current fastest time. So if the athlete that we've just entered in, if their time is faster than the current fastest time, then clearly their time should become the fastest time. So totals 4 should become equal to totals 3. So we've now said that basically if the current athlete is faster, then store their time as the fastest time. We also need to store their athlete number. So totals 5, the sixth position in that array, is going to contain current athlete ID, which is an ID of the athlete. Now at the moment, current athlete ID is not updated. We just set it to 0 initially up here. So somewhere we need to update it. I think the right place to be updating it is in get triathlon input. So we can do current athlete ID plus plus, which increments it by 1. And I get a complaint that current athlete ID was not declared, probably because I just spelt it wrong. Yes, because I spelt it like a muppet. There we go. That compiles. Now I just need to call update fastest before I go on. And I think I want to call update fastest after I've calculated the total time for an athlete. So I'm going to get all the times of an athlete for all 3 events. I'm going to add the total seconds together and store that in the 4th element of the array, and then I'm going to call update fastest. Update fastest will check if that time is faster than the current fastest time, and then if it is, it will assign the fastest time to be the current time of the current athlete and say that the fastest athlete ID is the current athlete's ID. I think we have one more thing to do before we test this, and that is to make sure that this works. We need to set the current fastest time, the fastest time to be a large number. Why do we need to do this? Well, if we set it to 0, or if indeed we didn't set it to anything, then we don't know what, well, if we didn't set it to anything, we won't know what the value is. So it'll be slightly hard to check whether the new time is faster than it. That won't really make any sense. And if we set it to 0, you can't really be faster than 0. So that's a slight problem. We need to set totals 4, which is the 5th element of the array containing the fastest time, to a large number, for example 2 billion, I think it's that billion, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, that's 200 million, there you go, 2 billion seconds. That's the current fastest time. Hopefully someone will manage to finish the triathlon in less than 2 billion seconds. Right, I believe that is going to work. What it will not currently do is print out the fastest time in the format that we want. Again, it's time to make a new function. Don't want it to return anything. I'm going to call it print fastest time. And it's going to take no parameters. It's just going to print out in the format that we've been told the fastest time, and I can sort of copy this here. So this is the code to break it down into hours, minutes and seconds. I want totals 4, which is the 5th element, which will contain the fastest time, and the format that it needs to be in is, let me count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we need to do serial of print line 10 equals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now we need that at the top and the bottom, and in the middle we need to print out. What do we need to print out? The fastest athlete was number dot plus. We want totals 5, or the 6th element in the array, which will contain the ID of the fastest athlete. What else? Yep. Plus with a total time of X hours, X minutes, X seconds. Where is it? Yeah, I think that's the format. And I just need to print that out. Instead of yay, we've stopped. I'm going to print out print fastest here. Check the format of everything else. Yeah, the format for each individual athlete's time requires a blank line underneath the total time, so we can just add in a \n, which is a new line, so that will add a sort of blank line underneath that print statement. Fastest time. Right, I will upload this and test it. I've still got my debug statement on, so actually I'm just going to uncomment that debug, or sort of comment out that debug and upload that again, because I don't really want to see my debug messages right now. I'm trying to test it, the sort of final version. Okay, it's uploaded. Welcome to the Triathlon Helper. Please enter the swim hours. I'm going to enter in a bunch of times to test my program. That's athlete number 1. Oh, whoops. Well, the format's not quite right, but I'll fix that in a bit. Athlete number 2. Well, let's say that athlete number 2 is going to be the fastest time. Fastest athlete with a time of 3 hours, 3 minutes, 3 seconds. So enter all that in. 3 hours, 3 minutes, 3 seconds. And we'll enter in one more athlete, which is going to have a slow time of, I don't know, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10. I think that's enough, isn't it? Oh, didn't like that. Did not like that at all. Interesting. Slightly confusing. Definitely a little bit confusing. Apparently that's a bug in our code. Whoops. Let's have a quick check and see if we can find out what's going on there. Get triathlon input. Total seconds. Does total seconds return a long? It does. This is the problem. The problem here is that these parameters are integers. When we do this calculation, it's done as an integer calculation, which means that if I enter in a large value for hours, for example 10 hours, total seconds is not going to work. The easy way to fix this is to cast hours, minutes and seconds to be longs. Alternatively, I believe if we change these to be, I change this to be longs, then that cast should be done for us, I believe. Let me upload that and I'll try it again. The delights of doing things live, eh? Try this again. Right, 10 hours, 10 minutes, 10 seconds. I think that's right. Yay! Does it correctly. Okay, so that's our first athlete. Athlete number 1, super slow. Athlete number 2 is going to be our fastest athlete with a time of 3 hours, 3 minutes. Okay, like that. And we're on to another athlete with some other time. Okay, there we go. So the fastest athlete, if I just make this a little bit bigger, the fastest athlete is the second one with a time of 3 hours, 3 minutes and 3 seconds. Hopefully if I enter in a minus number now, we get the fastest athlete was athlete number 2 with a total time of 3 hours, 3 minutes, 3 seconds, full stop. Okay, the only thing I have to change, I think, is a few bits of formatting. The first one is that this new line I added, I put in the wrong place. It's not supposed to be in the loop, it's supposed to be at the end after we've printed out the swim, bike, run and total times. So I'll just add serial.print line. I don't have to give it anything to print because it will print a line, a blank line, which is what I want. I also need to quickly change the this bit here to delete that space so that it conforms to the output that was specified in the worksheet. I'm going to upload this one more time. I'm going to try a different set of athletes, but then I reckon we're done. That'll be task 3 done. Task 4 goes on to do get the athlete's name as well. I'm not going to do that. All you need to do is to have a string to store the current athlete's name in. Actually, yeah, you want a string to store the fastest athlete's name and a string to store the current athlete's name, and if they are the fastest athlete, then you put their name, or you copy their name into the fastest athlete's name variable and do what we were currently doing. Not a huge change, so I won't really bother to do it. Let's just make sure that we're still working. Our fastest athlete this time can be the 3rd athlete, so I'm going to enter in some times. So that's the 1st athlete. For the 2nd athlete. And we want the 3rd one to be the fastest, so 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, 0, 0, 0. The world's fastest athlete. Okay, -1 to get the fastest. The fastest athlete was number 3 with a total time of 1 hour, 1 minute, 1 second. Fantastic. Job done. That is the end of this video and the end of this sort of mini series of videos covering these worksheets. If I get time this week, I'm going to make another video to do with some of the other worksheets. And then I'm going to stop, because unless people tell me that these things are useful, they take so much time to make that it's not really worth it. So if it is useful, please let me know. You can tell me in person, you can email me or message me on YouTube or Facebook, whatever it is. But let me know if it's useful, and I will find the time to make some more. If you have any comments, I need to work on what I say and how I say it a little bit. It's very easy just to spend minutes and minutes going blah. It's quite tricky to think of what you want to say. So if anyone has any comments about what they'd like to change, what they think was good or not good, what was helpful, if they'd like me to do these in a slightly different way, I'm happy to listen. So thank you, and I really hope that this has been useful for someone.